Let's talk about the 7 most common mistakes I see when people are using Ikonart stencils. The first mistake I see people make is choosing the wrong stencil film for their project. We have 2 different films, blue and purple. The blue has a lighter adhesive and the purple is a little stickier. They also have a different mesh count in them, so the purple is a little less flimsy than the blue. That makes the purple film perfect for projects like DIY screen printing shirts or jeans or custom fabrics. It also works the best for textured surfaces like canvas or wood signs, either with chalk paste or wood burning with torch paste. And the blue film is better for smooth, flat surfaces. This includes glasses, whether you're doing etching or paint, ceramic mugs, chalkboards, clay jewelry, cookies or cakes, paper crafting, or metal. The Ikonart kit comes with both films, so just make sure to choose the right one for your project. The second common mistake I see is not letting your stencil dry completely before using it. So if you see any sort of discoloration on your stencils, I don't know if you can see this right here, but this kind of like little, it almost looks like a little circle, but it's like lighter purple than the outside area. That is simply means your stencil is not dry. If you see them all over your stencil, you need to let it dry longer. And because our stencils have adhesive on the back, if your stencil isn't completely dry and that adhesive still has moisture in it, it's gonna act like glue to your surface. So if you're putting it on, especially something smooth like glass or ceramic, and then pull it off, you might damage your stencil because the adhesive part will want to stick to that surface because it wasn't dry yet. So make sure your stencil is always 100% dry before using it. The third mistake I see is not prepping the surface properly. And this is going to be different for every type of project depending on what surface you're doing. But I'll just give you a few examples. So for today, I'm screen printing the shirt, and prepping the shirt includes putting a tacky mat inside the shirt, and that's gonna help with not only smoothing out the shirt and getting rid of any wrinkles, but it's also gonna hold my shirt in place while I'm screen printing and also protect ink from bleeding through my shirt onto the other side. So this prep is very important and really helps you be successful when using your Ikonart stencils. Another example would be if you're going to be using Ikonart on glass, you're going to want to use some glass cleaner to clean that surface first. If you're using Ikonart on wood, it depends on the wood, but you might have to sand it, you might have to prep it with a sealer or a wax. So it really depends on what surface you're going to be using your Ikonart stencils with and how you're going to prep, but prepping is important. All right, the fourth mistake I see is not using the right paint or ink or medium for your project. So for example, I'm doing fabric today, so I'm going to make sure that I'm using a screen printing ink that specifically says fabric. That will make the ink long lasting when I want to wash the shirt. If I was doing a different type of crafting project, like maybe paper crafting or like different types of home decor or signs, I would use the regular screen printing ink. That's just called acrylic, not the fabric one. A lot of times for wood signs, people like to use a chalk paint. For my ceramic mugs, I always use a multi-surface paint. I like the Ikonart one. And for etching glass, we recommend Etch-All with our stencils. It's the most gentle on our stencils. And for wood burning, of course, our favorite torch paste. All right, and the fifth mistake I see is that people are using a paint or ink that is way too thin, and that causes a lot of bleed underneath your stencil. So as you can see here, the Speedball fabric ink is nice and thick. It sticks to my squeegee, it's not running all over the place, and that really helps when screen printing your Ikonart with your Ikonart stencils, because it's gonna glide over the top of the surface and just go in the mesh openings without bleeding underneath the stencil, and it just makes your life a lot easier. So different types of brands of acrylic paints and fabric paints are different thicknesses. So for example, apple barrel paints are very thin and you'll have a lot harder of a time screen printing with them than like a thicker acrylic paint. If you have a super thin acrylic paint and it's just not working, say you're doing a wood sign and you want to use acrylic paint on it and it's way too thin, then you would generally thicken it. Ooh, that looks good. I love all those little details in there. It looks so good. But anyways, you would thicken it with Coco's chalky powder, and that is basically making your own DIY chalk paste. And it really helps, especially for wood signs and home decor where paint can tend to seep into the wood, or if you have some kind of porous surface like that. Even on canvas, I really like to use chalk paste because it just allows the paint to sit on top of the surface versus seeping in any crevice or hole and causing that kind of spider vein look. So definitely if your paint is too thin, try adding a little Coco's chalky powder and that will really help. All right, the sixth most common mistake I see is people washing out their stencils too rough. So I'm just using a really soft bristle brush and I'm only rubbing on the top side of my stencil. I never rub or scrub the adhesive side of my stencil because that can break down my stencil too fast. And I'm just gently rubbing that ink off of there until all of the mesh openings are clear. And if you have staining, that's okay. As long as there's no chunks left in the mesh, it is completely fine. But I just gently rub, and then of course you want to make sure that you post expose. If you forgot to post expose, that can cause a lot of problems and your stencil will break down faster. I cover that in my 7 mistakes when making stencils video. But just be gentle, use warm water. Don't let your stencil soak too long. It can cause breakdown as well. I like to rinse mine off as soon as I'm done using it, and it's good to go. All right, and the final mistake I see people make when using their Ikonart stencils is returning the backer the wrong way. So before using your stencil for the first time, after it's made, after it's post-exposed, you want to write the word back on your backer or cut a little notch in your stencil. That way you'll know exactly which way to return the backer to your stencil. There's a special release coating on one side of this clear backer sheet, and if you return it to the wrong side, it will be really difficult to remove again. So you always want to make sure you replace it on the right side, and always do it when it's wet. You don't want to let your stencil dry first. This is protecting the adhesive and it'll keep your stencil stickier for longer. So those are the most common mistakes I see when crafters use Ikonart. My name is Fawn and I share tips and tricks on how to make and use Ikonart stencils. If you want to see a video on the 7 most common mistakes I see when people are making Ikonart stencils, check out this video right here. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified every time we upload.